Morning, everyone. Morning. Happy Easter. So, to the casual observer, Angela's life was pretty much perfect. Though only in her mid-30s, she'd already made partner at the accountancy firm where she worked. She had a loving, supportive husband. That was nice. Together, they had 2 beautiful children. They wanted for very little. They enjoyed very much. But Angela had a secret that embarrassed her. On the nights when her insomnia was bad, she had a compulsion to sneak out of the house, drive over to the other side of town, and lay down upon the grave of the toddler she'd lost some years earlier. When she spoke about this, she said that part of her life stopped the day that her child died. And even if you've never experienced what Angela had experienced, you can understand something of what she felt on those long sleepless nights. A need to be connected to a part of you that you've lost. A need to acknowledge, through tears if necessary, that life today is not as happy as it might have been. Because someone's missing. Something is missing. In the Gospel according to St. John, we're told that early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. Now, Mary Magdalene, as you perhaps know, is one of Jesus' most prominent followers. In the 4 Gospels, her name shows up 12 times, which is more times than most of the apostles. And from what we can gather, she was an integral part of the early Christian movement, which is totally fascinating, because according to legend, Mary is a very, very successful prostitute. This is why in Christian art, she's always either extravagantly dressed in the ancient equivalent of club wear, or completely naked with only her hair for modesty. So here's a classic Christian way of thinking about Mary. As you can see, she's partially disrobed. So she's either just seen or is just about to see one of her business clients. But what else is she doing? She's thinking. Quite deeply, it seems. And here's the message that this artist wants to convey to the church. It does not matter what your life is today. It does not matter where your life is today. It's always a good day to be thinking about your life, about where it's going, and what you're doing with it. Here's another painting. What you'll probably notice here is that Mary is holding a skull in her lap. Mary's a little bit different. My kind of girl. In Christian art, the skull is a visual reminder of your death. We call this memento mori. Remember that you will die. And so here the message that's being conveyed to the church through art is that today's always a good day to think about your life, because one day you'll be dead. And so for goodness sake, if you're not happy with how your life's going, change it while you still can. Remember what Mary did. Here's another. In this painting, notice the red hair. I guess red hair in art is symbolic of a wild woman. Suddenly grateful that the lights are low, otherwise I may have offended someone, I don't know. So in this painting, you notice 2 things about Mary. First thing you notice is that she's naked. But what else is she doing? Praying. Boom! Naked, praying. It's fantastic. We should put that in our marketing somewhere. Naked, praying. And this, of course, is what Mary is famous for. Doesn't matter where I am today. How bad it is today. I can always think about my life and where it's going and where it's headed and what sort of changes I might want to make. I can always imagine a better tomorrow. Doesn't matter how dark it is for me right now. I can always imagine stepping into the light. And in the gospel story, Mary finds that light through Jesus. So she hears what Jesus has to say, she believes what she hears, and it seems to turn her life completely around. Here's an image of Mary that I took from a movie still. What I like about this one is that in the lines on her face, you can see something of her difficult past. A few of us have those lines too. Lines that tell a story. But in her eyes, you can see a newness of life. And that's the tension that we live with sometimes as well. And that was Angela's tension. In some ways, her life had stopped some years earlier. When she lowered her child into the grave, she lowered a part of herself down alongside him too. There forever will be a part of her life that will remain on pause. But there were other things in her life that were legitimately brilliant and good and enjoyable, for which she was genuinely thankful. And because that tension is so beautifully human, so beautifully ordinary, I think this is why Mary becomes a hero of the church. She gets a college at Oxford and Cambridge named after her. She becomes a saint. You probably can't name the 12 apostles, but you've all heard of Mary Magdalene. Anyway, Mary, like Angela, like so many of us on some days, feels a need to just go and visit the grave of her loved one. And that need doesn't need to be explained. It just is. We can all understand it. But what I'd like you to notice is that John's careful to say that she feels her need on the first day of the week. And I'm asking you to notice this because the obvious thing for John to have said would have been that she went to the grave 3 days after Jesus had died. That's how you measure time in the days after you lose somebody. When your loved one dies, it's never just a Tuesday. It's never just another Thanksgiving. It's never just a Christmas. It's always so many days since they died. It's always the second Thanksgiving since they left. It's always so many Christmases since they passed away. That's how time is passed after you lose somebody. But in all 4 of the gospel stories, there is this insistence on saying this episode takes place on the first day. The subtle message being that this resurrection that we're about to hear about is the beginning of something new. And this subtle message is discordant because when you've lost as deeply as she has lost, the last thing on your mind is something new. That's why hope is such a subversive thing. Hope challenges every single commitment that you've made to today and asks you to imagine that tomorrow might take you by surprise and might actually be very different and very much better than what you had assumed. Notice also then that this newness is contrasted with the time of day. John is also very careful today to say that on the first day Mary's going somewhere and it's still dark. Here John's giving us a clue that Mary is in the dark. She's no idea that the worst day of her life is going to be a day she'll never forget. And this is the violence of the resurrection stories in the Bible. It asks us to imagine that sadness does not have to have the final word, not even on the saddest of days. So she gets to the tomb. She's literally and metaphorically in the dark. And she notices that the stone has been rolled away. For her, this is not yet good news. This is just more bad news. In the first century, when a person died, their body was washed, then scented, then wrapped in spices, then further wrapped in tight bandages. What happened after that was the body was placed on a stone shelf inside a tomb and was then left to decompose. Once the body had completely decomposed, The person's bones were then gathered up and placed in one of these. This is an ossuary, a bone box from the 1st century. So often in the Old Testament you read a line that says something to the effect of somebody died and then they were gathered to their fathers. Well, that gathering refers to this, the going into a tomb in which a person has completely decomposed, gathering their bones, putting them inside one of these boxes and laying them to their forever rest. That's how death worked for everybody. And so when John says that Mary saw that the stone had been rolled away, he's using the word saw in an entirely negative sense. She's seen lots of things in the past few days. She's seen Jesus die. She's seen Jesus' body be taken off the cross. She's seen Jesus' body be scented. She's seen Jesus' body be wrapped in cloths and bandages. She's seen Jesus' body be placed inside his tomb. And what she sees, she attaches to that her cultural understanding of what it means to die and be placed in a tomb. The body will decompose. The bones will then be gathered to the fathers in an ossuary. So operating within that firmly fixed mindset, she assumes that because the stone has been rolled away, Jesus' body has obviously been stolen. And so now she won't be able to give him a proper burial and say a proper farewell. Grave robbery, by the way, very big issue in the ancient world. So much so, a few years after Jesus' death, the Romans made it a capital offence. Doctors needed it, I don't know, weirdos needed it, people robbed graves all the time. So at this point in her life, Mary's dealing with this double loss. She's lost her living Jesus. Huge blow. But now she's lost her dead Jesus as well. Last year, the crab boat Louisa went down off the west coast of Scotland. And sadly, the skipper was drowned. And the tragedy was doubly hard for his family, because not only did he die, but his body was lost at sea. Speaking to the press a few days ago on the anniversary of the tragedy, the family said this: "We'll never be at peace until his body is found." And you can understand how they feel. They never got to have a funeral. They never got to say goodbye. To them, the death of their loved one felt doubly unreal and doubly painful. And this is what Mary is feeling in this moment. She wanted to have somewhere to go where she could deal with her grief. On those days when you feel those thoughts and you're hit by those memories and you just need to go there. You just need to say something. Deal with your thoughts. Something that connect her to her happier past, that could remind her what it was she lost and what it is she missed so much. And so the irony here is delicious. She has no idea. She's completely in the dark. That on her saddest day, sadness will not have the final word. In the next sentence, you can really see how frantic she is. So she comes running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, and she says they've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they've put him. Hearing this, Peter and the other disciple, that's John, the one writing the story, ran for the tomb. Both of them were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. I love this completely unnecessary detail. John's writing this story, and he just has to say this, doesn't he? He just has to say, yeah, so we had a race. I won. I'm not making a big deal out of it or anything, but I won. It's the most important day in Christian history, and he makes it a competition. It's a guy thing. And I'm with him. So John gets there first, and he bends over, looks into the strips of linen lying there, but he does not go in. So when John sees these strips of linen, he's confused in this moment. Like Mary, his first assumption would be that grave robbers have stolen the body. That's really the only thing he can assume. It's the most obvious explanation. But if that happened, why are the strips of linen still there? Makes no sense. no grave robber would bother to unwrap a body and clean it and leave all that there. They would just take everything. Makes no sense to him. Then Simon Peter comes along behind him, goes straight into the tomb, sees the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, did I mention that? Checking. He saw and believed. And then look what John says next. I love this about the Gospels. John the Apostle, the last guy left standing at the end of the first century, the most deeply thoughtful of the 12, the last guy to see Jesus. Look what he says. They, that is me and Peter, the other important guy, still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. He admits it, that on the first day he had no clue how to process what he was seeing. And he admits the reason he had no clue was because he didn't understand the Bible. Now let me put this honesty in context for you. Every Sunday, you get taught something of Christianity from Darren. Other people teach you stuff too, but Darren helps, right? And Darren's all right. Kind of. I guess. Maybe. Doesn't suck too bad. Okay. These guys had Jesus every day for 3 years, allowing for 8 hours of sleep a day. That's 17,000 hours of Bible teaching from Jesus. And at the end of that, he can still say, yeah, we didn't really understand the Bible. And it's not even a big book. It's like a sixth the size of Lord of the Rings. No clue. And Jesus was teaching us. And I say that for your encouragement. Because I know how frustrated you sometimes get with your lack of progress. And how slow you seem to be going. And maybe you're doing a lot better than you think. And maybe that's not just true in faith. Maybe that's also true in life. Maybe too easily you are your own worst critic. Under the loudest negative voice in your own head. Maybe you're doing a lot better and moving forward a lot faster than you sometimes tell yourself. Next sentence. Then the disciples, this is deep stuff, went back to where they were staying. This is my 19th Easter preaching this message. I still have no idea how to process this sentence. No clue. They lived with Jesus for 3 years. They hung on his every word. As far as we can tell, they loved him deeply. They've just gone to visit his tomb. They've discovered that his body's not there, but the bandages are. So this is a Scooby-Doo level mystery like this. There's a lot going on here. And their initial reaction is to say, we should probably get going now. Back in time for lunch. And best of all, they leave a distraught woman crying at an empty grave. Classy move, guys. Nice. Now Mary, on her own, stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head, the other at the foot. Now at this point, it's really my duty to point out that that women get unfair advantages in life. Right? Peter and John get bandages. Mary gets an angel. 2 angels. And the angels speak. They ask her, "Woman, why are you crying?" Now in the Bible, angels are not nice. Pretty much all the angelic encounters that are recorded in the Bible are somewhat terrifying experiences, and this one seems no different. So when the angels ask her, "Why are you crying?" they're not asking a question, they're making a statement. So this isn't, "Why are you crying?" This is, "Why are you crying?" They're male angels, obviously. What's the matter with you? Why are you crying? They're basically saying, "Woman, how dumb are you right now? I mean, would you like us to draw you a picture or something to make, well, what do we have here? Let's see. We've got an empty tomb, we've got a missing body, we've got bandages, and we've got 1, 2 angels. Does any of this seem normal to you? Have you ever had a day like this day? Would you like us to draw you some kind of picture, Mary?" I would have thought that at the very bottom of your list of emotions, there would be crying. Mary, it seems, is a bit dim. And I love that the Bible's okay pointing this out. More stupid in the next sentence. She says, "They've taken my Lord away and I don't know where they've put him." At this she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. So now we're into pure comedy. She's talking to Jesus about Jesus, but she doesn't know it's Jesus. Right? So apparently in this story, Jesus looks a bit different. It seems that after the resurrection, his appearance changed slightly. Maybe he decided to shave his head and grow a goatee. I like to think so. And of course the point in this almost farce now is to say to the later church to whom John is writing that you can feel that your Christianity isn't working, and yet Jesus can be standing right beside you. At the very point in your life where you are the most disillusioned with Jesus, Jesus can be right there with you. There is nothing contradictory about being disenchanted with Christianity. Indeed, the struggles and the disenchantments of life and family and faith, they all have a place. Just look at the markers in this story. Mary is in the dark, completely clueless. And yet Jesus, it seems, is perfectly happy to be in the dark with her. This scripture is for me a subtle rebuke to the modern notion that the presence of Christ in our lives is primarily something that we feel. That notion, however well-meaning, is to me completely insidious. How would it be if I stood up here on a Sunday morning and said, "Good morning everyone, welcome to church. It's good, isn't it, to feel the presence of Jesus? Let's all celebrate the presence of Jesus together." If I said that, you might well look around the church and wonder if you were the only one who was missing it. Because it's a Sunday morning, and some Sunday mornings you don't feel Jesus. You feel grumpy. You feel sad, you feel afraid, you feel depressed, you feel angry, you feel let down, you feel disappointed, you feel that life stabbed you in the back. That's how you really feel. And it's perfectly acceptable to hold all of that realness in balance with believing that somehow Jesus is with you. Not judging, just with you. Just with you. In the dark. So to talk about the presence of Christ in the Bible is not then to talk about something that we primarily feel. It is to talk about a reality that exists, regardless of how horribly real life has become. To talk about the presence of Jesus is to talk about a thing of which a follower of Jesus is sometimes completely unaware. Jesus is with you. It's just a statement, not a judgment, not a feeling. So then Jesus asks her, "Woman, why are you crying?" And then he says, "Who are you looking for?" When he asks her who she's looking for, he's questioning her assumptions. He's saying to her, what kind of Jesus were you looking for? What kind of day did you expect to have today? I mean, you woke up today with a certain set of assumptions, and you expected to feel a certain way, and you expected it to go in a certain way. How did you think this story was going to end? How did you think this was going to work out? What are you looking for? Not that it matters, because it's going to go different. Sadness won't have the final word on the saddest of days. Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him and I'll go get him." Still desperate. Then the penny drops. Jesus says to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which John explains means teacher. She apparently grabs him, as you can well imagine, tightly. Jesus says, "Do not hold on to me." Wasn't into hugs, really. He says, "For I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God." It's one of the most difficult lines in the New Testament to explain and to translate. What it basically means is Mary, now is not a time for this emotion. Now is a time to understand that this is the first day of a whole new world. It's not a time to celebrate that you got your past back and that you've been reconnected to something that you lost or that you felt that was missing. It's a time to go and understand this is a brand new day. It's going to be good. So Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. The announcement of the Christian story is reserved in the Bible for a middle-aged prostitute who wasn't all that smart. Love it. I love it because it reminds me that the story of the resurrection in particular, and of the Bible in general, is for people like you and I. People whose stories are complex. People who have to hold different things in tension. Good and bad, light and dark. People who sometimes feel that we're stumbling forward and stumbling backwards, and there's all sorts of things in our heads. It's for people like us that the story is for, and it is from people like us that the story came and to whom it was given. The imperfections and the embarrassments and the dark corners of our lives do not alienate us from this story. They connect us to it. And writing many years earlier, probably the last gospel to be written, certainly in fact, John writes this story in part, of course, to tell the church that Jesus is alive, but also in part to remind them that Jesus is there with them, even though it feels like he isn't. And so he says to his church at the latter part of the first century, "I know everything's gone wrong. And sometimes all your beliefs seem like a farce. And your life seems like a cruel joke. But the tomb is still empty. And Jesus is still with you. Happily, in the dark. And so are life and faith and family difficult? Do you worry? Are you scared? Let me leave you this Easter with the words of the prophet Isaiah. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be disheartened, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you. On the saddest of days in your life, sadness will not have the final word. We are resurrection people, and we believe in hope. We believe that tomorrow can be different from today and better than today. And we believe that hope wholeheartedly. Thank you for coming. God bless you. Happy Easter.